Kia ora whānau. We've just come from our first session of the Social Service Providers Aotearoa Kaimahi Hauora program, a really special 6-week program that we've put together for social services Kaimahi around the motu, who are working in communities alongside children, rangatahi and whānau. And our first session really was a focus on whanaungatanga and also then on whenua and the maramataka. So this space is really just a space for us to have a bit of a kōrero to reflect on the session. So Tuihana, I wonder, maybe would you like to kick us off?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I just want to say what always lifts my heart, and I tend to get quite emotional following on from these sessions, is just the vulnerability of whānau to share. And to share with one another in such a vulnerable and beautiful way. They're just, we know that they're going to step into uncomfortable spaces, but as Meritini and I both said actually at different times, from uncomfortable spaces comes the greatest growth. And what I love seeing is just how they enter and then how they leave the sessions. And you can almost feel their wairua, their tinana, their kind of all of them I suppose our objective is to, have them feel lifted and enhanced. And I really feel like that today, that was how many of them left. And it just always makes me get a little bit emotional. And so, yeah, just really mihi to those that show up. And I just want to mihi to you, Claire and Karinia, and for bringing this together for whānau. And I just always in awe of Meritini's wisdom and also the incredible generosity of sharing. So I think it was really nice that they focused on te whare tawawha, and then we shifted them into maramataka, but knowing that it's all interlinked and it's incredibly holistic. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Tuihana. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because we asked everyone when they joined the space today, a couple of kupu for how you're feeling. And I think some people said they were feeling tired, some were curious, some were excited, some were heavy, but then interesting, at the end of this session, a lot of people were saying they felt awakened and refreshed and they were buzzing, but I really want to pick up on what you said around people showing up for this kaupapa, because that's really why we created this program, to give that space for our social services Kaimahi who are doing hard work out there in our communities every day, supporting others and caring for others, but not always getting that time or space or just the headspace, to focus on their own holistic hauora. And I think today it was a real acknowledgement that people are wanting this and wanting to learn, from people like you, Meritini, who bring that deep mātauranga, grounded in mātauranga Māori, ancient wisdom that has been around for so long. And you talked today about, how that is practical knowledge. Do you want to share a bit, I guess, or reflect on how the session was for you and what you shared around maramataka?
I'm just always really grateful for any opportunity to speak into our space and to reinvigorate and help our people to remember the greatness that already sits within us. That was perfect timing, Tuihana, with He Kākanoaho, that reminder. And it's really important in the social service space to understand that exists for all of us. All of us have this amazing amount of potential, and sometimes, and that potential is quite limitless. And just the beauty of that, it helps. I guess that's a big way of understanding why we go away feeling quite refreshed, because we recognize the abundance that actually exists in that space. Because half the time we do feel empty. until you connect in spaces like this. You can draw. So what we call it up here in the Mauna area, we call it the kumete. And so the kumete is a bowl that is filled with everybody's thoughts and their wisdom is fed into the bowl. And we are not allowed to feed off the bowl until the bowl starts to overflow. So it's calling the kumete when it starts to overflow, we then to get to participate and taking from the overflow. We never take from the bowl itself, always from what's flowing out of it. And so that is what occurs when we all start sharing into the space, the beauty of whanaungatanga. The beauty of wānanga allows us to feed into the kumete so that each of us can start taking from the overflow of that and refreshing ourselves without even realizing. This all happens quite organically, and that's the part that I love, is that people don't even realize that all of this has occurred in this small space of time. The value that the koha tu koha mai, the aroha tu aroha mai, the whole reciprocity of these type of wānanga allows for that to occur, allows for us to feed from those things that are just flowing out, and that we get to replenish off that. So great to see that come up at the end, to hear that part of the kōrero come in, that everybody felt refreshed, they felt enthused, inspired. And that's what these spaces are about.
One thing that really stood out for me was when Meretini and you Tuihana as well were talking about looking through to wharetapa whā as a bit of a lens, that the smells, the tastes, the looks, they're all different for everybody, and some might be the same. But in that difference, it's okay to still be together. We come together in that difference and to be in that place together. And I heard the word cacophony being used a couple of times, Meretini, by you, the cacophony of modernity, and how do we navigate that? But also, could you say a little bit more, please, about the cacophony of the manu, or the breakout rooms of birds, and why you use that?
I wanted to use the cacophony of the manu specifically in the breakout rooms because in terms of our native birds, there's always a reason. So right now, specifically in this koanga season, in the matamata, which is the season that we're currently in at the moment, we have a returning of the koikoia, of the pipi whārauroa, and of the kuaka, which are 3 of our birds that have been offshore for the last 8 weeks. And so they start to make their way back. We are then out there listening to their calls to understand what's happening, what they're telling us from their journey across the oceans is what we're getting from that. Those are the different calls that we hear from the pipi whārauroa. So I don't know if you know, in our waiata, we have a waiata, like there's always at the end of our kōrero, we say kui, kui, whiti ora. So that there is the call of the pipi whārauroa. And so depending on how that sounds is dependent on what messages we're getting from their journey across the water. The kuaka is the same. You'll start seeing riro, which are the little yellow birds that have been here. They're endemic, so they stay here. And what happens when the pipi whārauroa come back in, they will shift the riro out of their nest in order to put their own eggs into their nest. So it's the beauty of what our manu have to share with us. So for me, our manu have amazing knowledge that just because most of us don't speak bird, doesn't mean that we don't have an opportunity to stop and listen to them anyway, because you know that there's value in what they've got to share. And I really wanted to, in those breakout rooms, allow people to lean into those spaces to be able to share their voice, because it's always value in what we can't understand, and the different perspectives. So each of those birds that I gave all have their own perspective on the different aspects that they show. So the kārewerewa is the falcon, the kahu is the hawk, the pipi whārauro, which is the kuku, and the koikoia is a long-tailed kuku, the tui. So tui are normally, so a biggest thing with the tui at the moment, because our kōwhai tree are completely covered in blossoms, you will see hundreds of tui come in and flop onto one big tree. So you normally have between 20 to 60, and yet tui are actually quite individual solitary birds, except for when it's breeding time and filling up time. So this is a very unusual behavior to see for them at this time of the year. So all these people, they send in all these hundreds of posts of all the tui that are in the kōwhai tree, but actually it's very rare for them to be like that, because they're not like that throughout the rest of the year. So it's just understanding that, like the noise and cacophony that makes as well. So, but yeah, the cacophony of our manu at the moment is really prevalent for us, that are really connected to our Pai Ora, that are learning to forecast and understand what our next season has ahead for us, to be able to make sense of it. And so sometimes you've got to zero out everything else that's making a cacophonic noise to listen into our own species that are telling us the journey of where they've been as well. So
thank you, Miritini, and I think it came through also really clearly when you talked about ko te ao and ko ao te ao. I am my environment, the environment is me. We can't separate ourselves from that. And so whether that's manu or te taiao or, you know, the birds or nature, we're in it, we're doing it, we're part of it all the time. And that came through really strongly in the session of the theme being around whenua and connecting. And I think, Claire, also you had some reflections in the chat that might be relevant here for our Kaimahi who couldn't attend today or had to leave early, unfortunately, because of that cacophony of modernity, about how timely this was for our members, and also how deeply powerful the sharing of te whaitapawha, the maramataka, is for our members as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of where we find ourselves, you know, this has been a really challenging couple of years for everyone. And we're still in that, you know, there's still a global pandemic going on. Things have loaded up on people and on whānau, and, you know, some of us are feeling pretty tired and pretty heavy, you know, at this point in the year. As you said, Miritini, it is beautiful and a relief that we are now in Koanga in this springtime, you know, because it does hopefully have a bit more sunshine going on, and things that can, longer days that can, you know, really nourish us. But that's partly as well why we thought this was a good time of year to be, I guess, offering this program out for our social services Kaimahi, because, yeah, like I said earlier, you know, for them to be nourished is just as important as the nourishment that they give to the whānau that they work with. And Miritini, I was really... I was just sort of floored by some of the mātauranga that you shared around the linkages between, you know, understanding the maramataka and how that can influence the way that we practice, the way that we manifest ourselves and show up in social services mahi, you know, when we're working with whānau, the different times of the moon and what it is doing and how it's influencing on whānau and how it's influencing on us, the times we might choose to have a hui that, you know, maybe is digging into some really difficult kaupapa to get the best out of that. I found that really, really powerful and practical knowledge that can start to be applied. But also you talked about, you know, one of the most powerful things that we can do in our mahi with whānau and social services is to go outside with them and to connect with papa tuanuku. And I'm interested if you've done that in your mahi. Have you seen the power of that, you know, working with whānau maybe in your mahi?
Yep, so constantly. So I specifically and currently working with rangatahi. So doing a bit of a pilot project with rangatahi around the Maramataka. And so this is Rangatahi Tāne. This is my 4th cohort as well over the year. So we do 10 to 12 week programs. This one is a 16-weeker. Where I start to develop emotional intelligence without them even realizing, and constantly using the taiao as our environment to engage in that. So it's the recognition of bigger than self. So understanding that bigger than self, because sometimes it feels like everything just collapses on top of us. So, and recognizing those moments where we might be like that, so that it's okay to feel into that space. So we do a lot of training around the huna phases specifically, because it is those phases, these are 5 phases that are in there that are really heightened awareness around suicide. And so these rangatahi will happily speak into that space as well. And so it's not just making them sit in it. Them to really start to, hold on, I think I'm just going to see if it's helping them to realise that there's something bigger than themselves, and that whilst we can sometimes be okay to sit in this space, we do eventually need to come out of it, because nothing like a seed doesn't stay underneath the ground for too long. Like the maximum time that a seed will stay underground is in terms of my hui, which is about 14 to 16 days, that a hui will sit underneath the soil before it sprouts back up. So I'm not saying to them that they've got 14 to 16 days. Actually, I say to them they've got 2 to 3, and then they need to pull up and come up out of that. And then we discuss it. Communication is highly key for anything that we do. And so it's just really recognizing that, and we can see that in the taiao. You close your eyes and you listen. So the tamatia phases that I talked about, what we'll do with all of our people when we're having wānanga is we'll go outside during tamatia just to show them the practical application of it. So we'll go out and we'll sit underneath trees and we'll try to talk to each other. And of course, because normally what's happening in tamatia is that there's winds blowing, the trees are rustling, especially during autumn, it's even worse. And so you can't hear anyone. And so highly are we experiencing miscommunication. So then we talk about that. Okay, so we understand that this tamatia phase, the wind's doing this, we can't hear a single thing, and yet we're trying to communicate. So therefore we need to change the way that looks. Let's look at this practically now and move back inside and think about how we might, do things differently. The same as at Ako Nui, we do that Ako Nui moon, we take rangatahi out for a hikoi in the dark, and show them how the moon can light up corners of pathways that they never once decided to walk on before. They can see it from a different perspective. Or why is it that when we see a bush, we saw it in the daytime, it looked like a bush, and then all of a sudden at nighttime, it looks like a scary monster. Why is that? These are the practical ways that this is the things that our mind does. And so just having a kōrero with that, having a discussion around that. Like we all have fears, it doesn't matter what they are, but we all have them and it's okay. And it might be the most unrealistic fear ever, but it's okay to be there, to be in that, to share that with somebody else. Yeah. So those are just some really basic ones that I use constantly. With our rangatahi. With my own kids, we hunt. And so my girls in that, know how to take a life with a gun, in terms of having to fill up our freezers, and they understand that. They understand the circle of what that means, and that eventually they will go back. Grief processes, when we're looking at the taiao, there's a really, like when we look at whetū, we talk about grief and things like that, and that sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. And so when we're thinking about the people we love, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. But they're always going to be there. They're never far from our thoughts. So just because someone's physicality isn't there doesn't mean that they're not present. So like there's so much lessons in what our tupuna have told us if we just stop and just take a little bit of time to just have a talk about it.
I think that was such a powerful call to action that you shared during the session, Meretini, about just stop, connect, reflect, and just how powerful that can be. And I think, even just a couple of minutes a day, starting there, and building it up over time, it can be just so powerful. And I know what you've just shared there around sort of the practical application into your mahi. I know that other social services Kaimahi will find that really fascinating and helpful to hear, because these are the things that we don't always have time to hear. What are others doing to really, I guess, ensure that the practice of social services is holistic and it does take into account and nourish those different, taha of te whare tapawha.
I'll tell you one thing, actually, and I forgot to mention it, that we use is check your bias. So we'll do check yourself for everything that we do. We go into the space and say, okay, I just got to check myself. Am I feeling like this because of it? Or am I feeling like this because this is where I sit?
Yeah.
And I think that Te Whare Tapawha gives us a lovely grounding in different aspects of check my bias, and I think Tuihana, one of the koha ātāhua that you bring, and all of the kaimahi on this program will get to experience, is waiata. So as soon as that beautiful, and I am going to put you on the spot for this recording and ask if you will share one before we finish it, please, Tuihana. But what it brings is this beautiful, for me anyway, and I'm sure for a lot of others, this instant lightening of spirit to listen to such beautiful waiata. And it reminds me, and I think we got that reflection from a lot of the chat in today's session, that there are these simple ways that we can do that 2 or 3 minutes of reconnecting to our hauora around waiata, or just kai, nourishing with kai. There's these nourishing ways that we, our members doing all that awesome mahi that they do can give back in little moments to themselves with things that are right there beside them or right there inside them.
And also ka, that was really where you started us today, Tuihana, with just the breath. And I was reminded how powerful it is and how grounding it is just to take 3 deep breaths into our diaphragm and out, and let something go. But Ihana, kopakaro.
Well, I think I learned this through Meretini's uncle, so Che Wilson, and also Nina Kaitani Tiraro is another, Gail Boswin Watine is another, but there's many practitioners of ha. And I think it's just understanding that, if we don't have ha, if we're not breathing, if we don't give ourselves breath, then we're not we're not here physically, right? We're here wairua, we're in another space then. We've moved on from this world and into another. And we undervalue ha. And it's one thing that I've learnt through various people is that, is to always bring it back to ha, because it's ha that gives us the vital essence for our hauora, for our oranga, for to be Pai Ora, for all of that. And I think that when you talk about, ha itself has a vibration. So your ha has a vibration. And when we talk about waiata has a vibration. And that connects us to whenua, to the taiao, because the maramataka, the moon, the sun, taiao, the world around us has a vibration. And so when we do waiata, it's a vibration. And you can tell when you sing a waiata where it's coming from through the vibration of the waiata that you're sharing. And the reason I shared that was because, you know, Meritini was speaking about kākano. And so it's just a reminder to ourselves that we are always born of greatness, but somewhere along in our journeys where that can be a little bit squashed or a little bit altered or a little bit changed. And it's about actually, you know, remembering that we are born of greatness and that we are all great. So, but, you know, we are humbled by this intrinsic knowledge that our that comes from our tūpuna. You know, we create our own as well on this planet, you know, but really we're just elevating what we've already been given and gifted, you know, from our tūpuna. So yeah, that's why the use of and to be honest, during these conversations as Meritini was talking, it wasn't that there was an intentional, oh, I'm going to sing now. It was that Meritini's kōrero, there's a tohu, or it's bigger than a tohu, but there's something that comes to you and right, okay, this is now what you have to do. So this is why sometimes during these sessions, you can have prescribed ways, but actually a lot of the time it comes through Hauora. So it's about kind of flowing with that at times, and hence the waiata.
And I think listening to that wairua, you know, and actually tapping into that is such a powerful part of practice when working in the community, when working with whānau. But I think that sometimes we're taught not to listen to that, you know, or it gets squashed down. And so I think, Tuihana, you talk about going with the flow of the wairua and really listening to that. That's powerful as well in the mahi that we're doing in the community too.
And I'm just going to probably speak a little bit. It's Western ways of thinking and being that squash this. This is a very personal whakaaro. Okay, it's not a whakaaro that everyone will share or intrinsically believe in, but it's through Western ways of thinking that I believe that some of our pūmanawa, some of our taonga have been quashed. I mean, this is why there's this regeneration of, I mean, maramataka's always been there. Moko kauai has always been there, you know, but this is why there's almost like a rebirth or a regrowth of some of those ways. They've just been sitting there. They've never gone anywhere, but now they've been elevated again and again and again. And this is why Indigenous, you talked about it being ancient. It is ancient. And it's almost like a reclaiming of that and elevating that. I mean, you just need to look at the way that we now celebrating Matariki, the way that we just recently celebrated Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, the kind of resurgence of Ngā Tamatoa after 50 odd years. So there's all these, you know, there's all this, maramataka suddenly really, not suddenly actually, but it's back with a vengeance, I feel, and it's just such a beautiful way of being. And if we look at Taiao and what's happening with Taiao, well, that's a reflection of Western ideologies. So, you know.
And maybe that's a good place for us to sort of come to the end of this kōrero, but it gives me the opportunity just to, you know, thank you both, because as wahine Māori, the mātauranga that you share with us all, it is a taonga, you know, and as for us who are not Māori, who are tangata tiriti and tauiwi, we have a place within this to tautoko that, to learn and understand, and to be alongside, to, you know, uplift that where we can. So that's partly why we really champion that within social service providers Aotearoa, because we respect and acknowledge and celebrate the Indigenous knowledge that sits in Aotearoa, and we're grateful, you know, that you have both shared that with us. So unless anyone's got any last whakaaro that you want to share.
I was just thinking I could just close us out. Oh, sorry.
I'll just say a couple. I'm not going to speak for long because I think you've done an amazing job this morning. All the mahi that's been done. I feel privileged because, you know, I wasn't meant to sit back in today and provide a little bit of support for you. but it's been a privilege. And they say, you know, you need to be where you need to be, you know, during the day or wherever you are. So thank you for that opportunity to support you today. Metatini, I could listen to you for hours. I'm definitely going to follow you now on Instagram. I'll probably be in touch at some stage. And for me, I think it was just a little bit of reconnection with my elders, the knowledge, and bringing it back to the surface. So, Kaimahi, kia koutou. It's been wonderful. Thank you this morning. And I look forward to seeing how the rest, I know they'll be a smash. I have no doubt, but no, it's wonderful. Wonderful space. It's lovely to see how the participants actually left the session today as well, as opposed to when they arrived.
Sure. Yeah. We couldn't have done it without you.
I'll just close us.
Yeah.
Aye. Sorry, I was just going to say I can sing us out as we close off the session.
Thank you,
Okay. Oh, I feel like I need to stand for this one. Just to keep my feet grounded. E kako noa hau, I rui a mai, I rangi a te a. 'Cause I can never be lost, I am the sea, born of greatness, descended from a line of chiefs. E kako noa. Kapai. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Ngā mihi.
Ngā mihi.
Kia ora. Thank you, everyone.
Karani, I'll let you start
Karania.
recording.
I'll start recording. There you go.
Karania. Before you go.